Christmas Eve at Denver International Airport should have been magical. Instead, I stood frozen at gate B12 staring at the airline employee who had just delivered the worst news of my 28-year life. My ticket to Maui had been canceled from the system. No explanation. No backup options. Just gone. Behind me, my parents shuffled nervously, while my sister Jessica smirked like she knew something I didn't. Her boyfriend Tyler avoided eye contact completely. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal as my family grabbed their carry-ons without hesitation. Mom gave me a quick shoulder pat and said they'd figure it out later. Jessica's parting shot cut deepest as she walked away without looking back. The gate area emptied as passengers disappeared down the jetway. I watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the Hawaiian Airlines Boeing 737 pushed back from the gate carrying my family toward their tropical Christmas, while I stood alone with my black rolling suitcase and a growing sense that this wasn't random misfortune. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. Jessica's knowing smile, Tyler's nervous energy. The way my parents seemed more relieved than surprised when the gate agent announced my cancellation. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I decided to dig deeper into what had actually happened. The gate agent, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, had already moved on to cleaning up paperwork from the boarding process. I approached her counter with determination rather than desperation. "Excuse me, Patricia. I need to understand exactly how my reservation disappeared from your system." She looked up with the practiced patience of someone who dealt with travel disasters daily. "Sir, these computer glitches happened during the holidays. The system probably just had a hiccup. A hiccup that affected only one passenger out of 267 that seems statistically impossible." My persistence caught her attention. She pulled up her computer terminal and began typing with renewed focus. Her expression shifted from polite dismissal to genuine concern as she scrolled through screens of data. "This is unusual," she muttered more to herself than to me. "Your reservation was manually canceled at 2:43 this afternoon. Someone with system access removed you from the manifest." My heart rate quickened. Someone with access? What does that mean? Patricia's supervisor, a tall black man named Marcus, had been listening from behind the counter. He stepped forward with a serious expression that confirmed my worst suspicions. "Mr. Thompson, I think we need to investigate this further. Manual cancellations require specific authorization codes. This wasn't a computer error." Marcus led me to a small office behind the gate area where multiple computer monitors displayed real-time flight information. He pulled up detailed logs that showed every transaction associated with my reservation over the past 48 hours. "Look here," he said, pointing to a specific entry. "At 14:43 today, someone used employee credentials to access your booking and cancel it. The cancellation was processed from Terminal 7 in the main concourse. Can you see who did it?" Marcus hesitated before clicking through additional screens. "The credentials belong to Tyler Morrison. He's a part-time baggage handler with United, but he also has access to shared reservation systems for partner airlines like Hawaiian." Tyler Morrison. My sister's boyfriend of 8 months. The guy who always seemed to know a little too much about airline operations for someone who supposedly just loaded luggage. "I need copies of these records," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I need security footage from Terminal 7 at 2:43 this afternoon." Marcus studied my face carefully. "Mr. Thompson, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, this could be a serious criminal matter. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I've never been more sure of anything in my life." While Marcus printed the computer logs, I called the airport security office and requested to speak with someone about reviewing surveillance footage. The security supervisor, a former police detective named Janet Walsh, agreed to meet us at the main security office within the hour. The walk through the airport felt surreal. Holiday travelers rushed past with their rolling bags and excited children heading toward family gatherings and vacation adventures. Meanwhile, I was pursuing evidence that my own family had deliberately sabotaged my trip for reasons I couldn't yet understand. Janet Walsh turned out to be exactly the kind of no-nonsense investigator I needed. She listened to my story without interruption, reviewed Marcus's computer printouts, and immediately pulled up the security camera system. Terminal 7 yesterday afternoon, she said, typing commands into a sophisticated digital surveillance interface. Let's see what your sister and her boyfriend were really doing while you thought they were buying snacks. The black and white footage loaded on a large monitor. Janet fast-forwarded to 2:30 in the afternoon and switched to normal speed. Within minutes, we spotted Tyler approaching one of the self-service kiosks near the coffee shops. But instead of purchasing food, he inserted what appeared to be an employee access card and began typing on the terminal keyboard. Zoom in on his hands, I requested. The enhanced footage clearly showed Tyler accessing airline reservation systems rather than ordering coffee. He spent 12 minutes at the terminal, occasionally glancing around to ensure nobody was watching his activities. There's your smoking gun, Janet said grimly. He deliberately accessed your booking and canceled your ticket. The question is why? Marcus had been quietly reviewing additional data on his tablet. Mr. Thompson, I found something else. Tyler has been flagged in our system for suspicious activity 3 times in the past 6 months. Other passengers have complained about mysteriously canceled reservations after interacting with him during baggage handling. He's done this before. It appears so. We just never had enough evidence to prove deliberate misconduct, until now. Janet burned copies of the surveillance footage onto DVDs and provided me with official incident reports documenting everything we had discovered. Marcus supplied detailed computer logs showing the exact sequence of Tyler's unauthorized system access. As we finished compiling evidence, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. Hope you're not too disappointed about missing the trip. You should be used to being left out by now. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing my response, don't worry, your new year will be unforgettable. Back in my apartment that evening, I spread the evidence across my dining room table, like pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to form a disturbing picture. The surveillance footage, computer logs, and incident reports painted a clear narrative of deliberate sabotage, but I still couldn't understand the motive behind Jessica's cruel betrayal. Tyler Morrison wasn't just some random baggage handler with a grudge against airline passengers. I spent hours researching his background through social media profiles, employment records, and public databases. What I discovered changed everything. According to his LinkedIn profile, Tyler's primary employer wasn't United Airlines. He worked full-time for Pinnacle Investigations, a private detective agency specializing in financial background checks and asset recovery. His airline job was just part-time weekend work that provided him with access to passenger information and reservation systems. Why would a private investigator want to prevent me from traveling to Hawaii? The answer hit me like ice water when I remembered the date December 24th. Tomorrow was Christmas Day. More importantly, December 26th was the date scheduled for my grandmother's probate hearing. Grandma Dorothy had passed away 3 months earlier, leaving behind a complicated will that had been tied up in legal proceedings ever since. As her eldest grandchild and the person who had cared for her during her final years, I was named primary beneficiary of her $50,000 life insurance policy and her Portland house worth another $120,000. But there was a catch. According to the terms of her will, if the primary beneficiary failed to appear at the probate hearing or was deemed unavailable by the court, the inheritance would transfer to secondary beneficiaries. In this case, that meant my parents and Jessica. I grabbed my laptop and searched for the probate case online. The Clark County court system allowed public access to case documents, and what I found made my blood run cold. The original hearing had been scheduled for January 15th. Someone had petitioned the court to move it up to December 26th, citing urgent financial circumstances and the primary beneficiary's alleged abandonment of family responsibilities. The petition was signed by Jessica Marie Thompson and supported by an affidavit claiming I had become estranged from the family and couldn't be located for legal notifications. My phone rang, startling me out of my research. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a Portland area code. Mr. Thompson, this is Bradley Hutchinson from Hutchinson and Associates. I'm the attorney handling your grandmother's probate case. Mr. Hutchinson, I was just reviewing the court documents online. I need to understand why the hearing was moved up without my knowledge. There was a long pause before he responded. Mr. Thompson, your sister contacted us 2 weeks ago, claiming you had disappeared following a family dispute. She provided documentation suggesting you were no longer maintaining contact with relatives and might be avoiding legal responsibilities. What kind of documentation? Text messages, witness statements from family members, and a report from a private investigator confirming your alleged estrangement from family obligations. A private investigator, Tyler Morrison. Mr. Hutchinson, I've never been estranged from my family, and I've been waiting for this probate hearing since September. Someone has been deliberately misleading you in the court. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Thompson. Do you have evidence to support your claims? I looked at the surveillance footage and computer logs spread across my table. More evidence than you can imagine. And I'll be at that hearing on December 26th to present all of it. After hanging up with the attorney, I continued digging into Tyler's background. His employment with Pinnacle Investigations specialized in asset recovery and inheritance disputes. Client testimonials on the company website described successful efforts to help families claim inheritances from estranged relatives who had abandoned their legal responsibilities. The pieces were falling into place. Jessica and Tyler had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal my inheritance by making me appear unreliable and estranged from the family. The canceled airline ticket wasn't random cruelty, and it was a calculated move to prevent me from attending the probate hearing and defending my legal rights. But their plan had a fatal flaw. They assumed I would accept defeat and disappear quietly, just like I had always done during childhood conflicts. They didn't expect me to investigate, gather evidence, and fight back with the same determination that had carried me through college and my career in financial analysis. I spent the rest of the evening documenting every connection between Tyler's investigation company, Jessica's probate petition, and the deliberately canceled airline ticket. By midnight, I had compiled a comprehensive case file that exposed their inheritance fraud scheme. My phone buzzed with another message from Jessica. Maui is beautiful. Thanks for not ruining our Christmas with your drama. This time I didn't respond. Actions would speak louder than words. The next morning, Christmas Day, I drove to Pinnacle Investigations instead of opening presents with family. The office building was closed for the holiday, but I had called ahead and arranged to meet with Tyler's supervisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Chen, who had expressed serious concern about my allegations. Sarah arrived at the office wearing casual clothes and an expression of professional determination. She unlocked the building and led me to a conference room where we could spread out all the evidence I had gathered. Mr. Thompson, what you're describing represents a serious breach of our company's ethical standards and potentially criminal behavior by one of our employees, she said after reviewing the surveillance footage and computer logs. Tyler Morrison has been using his position at your company and his airline access to manipulate inheritance cases for personal gain. Sarah pulled out Tyler's employment file and began cross-referencing dates with my timeline. This explains some irregularities we've noticed in his recent case reports. He's been working inheritance disputes that weren't assigned through our normal client intake process, meaning he's been freelancing. Worse than that, he's been manufacturing inheritance disputes for cases that don't exist, then manipulating the outcomes for personal profit. Sarah showed me internal company emails where Tyler had submitted expense reports for surveillance work on inheritance cases that had no corresponding client contracts. He had been billing the company for investigative work while actually helping his girlfriend steal inheritance money from her own brother. We've been investigating Tyler for the past month, Sarah continued. He's been using company resources for unauthorized personal investigations, But we couldn't prove misconduct until now. What kind of unauthorized investigations? Sarah pulled up additional files on her laptop. Background checks on airline passengers, financial research, on families going through probate proceedings, surveillance reports on people who never requested our services. He's been running his own side business using our equipment and credentials. The scope of Tyler's fraud operation was staggering. He had identified dozens of inheritance cases through his airline access, then used his investigation company resources to manipulate probate proceedings in favor of secondary beneficiaries who would pay him for his services. "I want to help you stop him," Sarah said firmly. "But I need your cooperation in documenting everything properly for law enforcement." We spent the next 3 hours developing a comprehensive strategy to expose Tyler's fraud network while gathering additional evidence for criminal prosecution. Sarah provided access to Tyler's work computer email accounts and client files that revealed the full extent of his illegal activities. "Look at this," Sarah said, pulling up Tyler's email correspondence with Jessica. "They've been planning your inheritance theft for 2 months. The email chain showed detailed discussions about manipulating the probate hearing date, creating false documentation of family estrangement, and using Tyler's airline access to prevent me from attending court proceedings." Jessica had promised Tyler $25,000 from the inheritance money in exchange for his investigative services. "They're treating my grandmother's death like a business opportunity," I said, fighting back anger. "And they've done it before. Look at these other cases." Sarah showed me similar email chains involving other families, other inheritance disputes, other canceled airline tickets that prevented primary beneficiaries from attending probate hearings. Tyler and Jessica had refined their scheme through multiple successful thefts. How many people have they stolen from? Based on these records, at least 12 families over the past 18 months. Total theft amount exceeds $400,000. Sarah and I developed a plan to gather additional evidence, while Tyler and Jessica remained in Hawaii, unaware that their fraud scheme was unraveling back home. We would document everything thoroughly, then coordinate with law enforcement and the probate court to ensure justice was served. "There's something else," Sarah said as we prepared to leave the office. "Tyler has been scheduling additional inheritance manipulation cases for early next year. He's planning to steal from more families using the same airline cancellation method. Not if we stop him first." Sarah handed me her business card and a secure phone number where I could reach her 24 hours a day. "Mr. Thompson, what Tyler and your sister have done is unconscionable, but it's also given us evidence to shut down his entire operation and help all his previous victims recover their stolen inheritances, and make sure he never hurts another family." Exactly. By New Year's Day, Tyler Morrison's criminal career will be permanently over. As I drove home from Pinnacle Investigations, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. Jessica and Tyler had tried to steal more than just inheritance money. They had tried to steal my dignity, my family relationships, and my grandmother's final gift of financial security. But their greed had made them careless, and their carelessness would become their downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Missing you on Christmas morning. Hope you can join us next year." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged with simple apologies. Trust once broken through deliberate betrayal required consistent actions over time to rebuild. But first, justice had to be served. December 26th arrived gray and cold, perfect weather for a probate hearing that would determine whether justice prevailed over fraud. I arrived at the Clark County Courthouse 30 minutes early, carrying 2 briefcases filled with evidence that would expose Jessica and Tyler's inheritance theft scheme. Bradley Hutchinson, my grandmother's probate attorney, met me in the courthouse lobby with the expression of professional curiosity mixed with concern. "Mr. Thompson, I have to admit I'm surprised to see you here. Your sister's documentation suggested you had abandoned any interest in your grandmother's estate." "Mr. Hutchinson, I've never been more interested in anything in my life. and I have evidence that will fundamentally change your understanding of this case. We found a private conference room where I could present the surveillance footage, computer logs, email correspondence, and financial records that Sarah Chen had helped me compile. Hutchinson's expression shifted from skepticism to alarm as he reviewed each piece of evidence. This appears to document a deliberate conspiracy to defraud the court and steal inheritance assets through false representation, he said, after examining the email chains between Tyler and Jessica. That's exactly what it documents. My sister and her boyfriend have been running an inheritance theft operation using his access to airline systems and private investigation resources. Hutchinson immediately called the court clerk to report potential fraud in the probate proceedings. Within an hour, Judge Patricia Martinez had reviewed the evidence and ordered an emergency investigation into Jessica's claims about my alleged estrangement from family responsibilities. Mr. Thompson, if these allegations prove accurate, your sister could face serious criminal charges for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy, Judge Martinez explained during an impromptu hearing in her chambers. Your Honor, I believe she's already facing those charges. I've been working with law enforcement and Tyler Morrison's employer to document the full scope of their criminal activities. The judge postponed the probate hearing pending the fraud investigation, but she made one immediate ruling that sent a clear message about the case's trajectory. Jessica's petition to transfer inheritance rights was denied, and I was confirmed as the primary beneficiary of my grandmother's estate. Mr. Thompson, I'm awarding you immediate access to the life insurance proceeds and property rights. The evidence clearly shows you've been the victim of a deliberate fraud scheme designed to steal your rightful inheritance. Walking out of the courthouse with legal confirmation of my inheritance rights felt like emerging from a dark tunnel into bright sunlight. But the real satisfaction would come when Tyler and Jessica faced the consequences of their criminal behavior. Sarah Chen called me that afternoon with updates on the law enforcement investigation. Tyler's airline supervisor contacted FBI Financial Crimes Division this morning. They're treating this as a federal case because it involves interstate fraud and airline system manipulation. What does that mean for Tyler? It means he's looking at potential federal prison time rather than just state charges. Airline security fraud carries much heavier penalties than simple inheritance theft. While I was securing my legal victory in court, Tyler and Jessica were posting cheerful vacation photos on social media from their Maui resort. They had no idea that federal investigators were already preparing arrest warrants based on evidence Sarah and I had provided. There's something else, Sarah continued. We found records of 12 other families Tyler has defrauded using similar methods. The FBI wants to coordinate arrests to ensure he doesn't have time to destroy evidence or flee the country. When will they arrest him? December 30th, when their flight returns to Denver. Airport security will be waiting at the gate when they disembark. The irony was perfect. Tyler would be arrested at the same airport where he had sabotaged my vacation using the same airline access credentials that had enabled his fraud scheme. I spent the next few days documenting additional evidence and contacting other fraud victims Sarah had identified through Tyler's company records. Each family had a similar story. Mysterious canceled airline tickets, preventing primary beneficiaries from attending probate hearings, followed by secondary beneficiaries claiming inheritance rights through Tyler's false documentation. The Johnson family in Seattle had lost $60,000 when their son's ticket to his father's probate hearing was mysteriously canceled. The Rodriguez family in Phoenix lost their grandmother's house when similar airline problems prevented the primary heir from attending court proceedings. Tyler and Jessica's scheme had destroyed families across multiple states, but now those families would have justice and financial recovery. Sarah's investigation had uncovered Tyler's hidden bank accounts containing over $300,000 in stolen inheritance money that could be returned to victims. On December 29th, I received a text from Jessica. Maui has been amazing. Thanks for not ruining our trip with your usual drama. See you next year. I smiled as I typed my response. Don't worry, your homecoming will be unforgettable. December 30th dawned crisp and clear in Denver, perfect weather for justice to be served. I arrived at the airport 3 hours before Tyler and Jessica's scheduled arrival, not because I wanted to witness their arrests personally, but because FBI agent Patricia Williams had asked me to provide final testimony for their investigation. Agent Williams was a 15-year veteran of financial crimes investigations who had seen every type of fraud scheme imaginable. She reviewed my evidence with the methodical precision of someone who understood how crucial details could make or break a federal case. Mr. Thompson, your documentation of this fraud scheme is the most comprehensive victim report I've encountered in my career, she said, as we sat in an airport security office overlooking the terminal where Tyler would soon be arrested. I wanted to make sure every detail was preserved. Too many families have been hurt by this scheme. Thanks to your investigation, we've identified 43 separate fraud incidents involving Tyler Morrison and your sister over the past 2 years. The total theft amount exceeds $800,000. 43 families. I sat in stunned silence as Agent Williams explained the scope of Tyler and Jessica's criminal enterprise. They had perfected their inheritance theft method through dozens of successful frauds before targeting my grandmother's estate. How did they find so many victims? Tyler had access to passenger information through his airline job. He would identify families traveling for funerals or probate hearings, then research their inheritance situations through his investigation company resources. If he found valuable estates with complex beneficiary arrangements, he would manipulate the proceedings through ticket cancellations and false documentation. Agent Williams showed me files on other victims' elderly estates worth millions of dollars, family businesses transferred to undeserving relatives' life insurance policies stolen through forged documentation. Tyler and Jessica had turned family tragedy into personal profit with cold, calculated efficiency. What will happen to them? Tyler faces federal charges for fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and computer crimes. Combined sentence could be 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Your sister faces state charges for fraud and conspiracy, probably 3 to 5 years, depending on her level of cooperation. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Hawaiian Airlines Flight 842 touched down at Gate B12, the same gate where my nightmare had begun 1 week earlier. Agent Williams and I watched through security monitors as passengers deplaned, chatting happily about their tropical vacation experiences. Tyler emerged from the jetway first, pulling a bright blue rolling suitcase and wearing a Hawaiian shirt that looked ridiculous in December Colorado weather. Jessica followed behind him, laughing at something on her phone and completely oblivious to the federal agents waiting just beyond the security checkpoint. They made it exactly 12 steps into the terminal before Agent Williams and her team surrounded them with badges and handcuffs. Tyler Morrison, you're under arrest for federal fraud charges. Jessica Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Tyler's confident vacation swagger evaporated as he realized his criminal career was over. Jessica's cheerful laughter turned to shocked silence as airport security cleared other passengers away from the arrest scene. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched from the security office as Tyler and Jessica were processed, photographed, and led away in handcuffs. Other passengers stared in confusion at the sudden law enforcement activity, but I felt only a deep sense of satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Agent Williams handed me official documentation confirming that Tyler's hidden assets would be frozen pending restitution to fraud victims. Mr. Thompson, you should know that your investigation has given us the evidence needed to recover stolen money for dozens of families. Your grandmother would be proud of how you fought for justice. My phone started buzzing with frantic calls from my parents, who had just learned about Jessica's arrest through local news coverage. I ignored the calls for now. There would be time for family conversations later, after the legal proceedings were complete. and the full scope of Jessica and Tyler's crimes became public knowledge. That evening, local news stations ran stories about the inheritance fraud ring bust at Denver International Airport. Tyler's private investigation company issued a public statement condemning his criminal actions and announcing full cooperation with federal investigators. Sarah Chen called me with additional updates on the case. Tyler's attorney is already discussing plea bargain options with prosecutors. He's looking at overwhelming evidence and serious federal charges, so cooperation might be his only hope for reduced sentencing. What about Jessica? She's maintaining innocence and claiming she didn't understand the legal implications of Tyler's fraud scheme, but her email correspondence clearly shows active participation in planning and executing the inheritance thefts. Will that help or hurt her case? It depends on whether she accepts responsibility and provides honest cooperation with the investigation. The prosecutors are more interested in recovering stolen assets for victims than maximizing prison sentences. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in 1 week. 7 days ago, I had been the abandoned family member left behind at an airport, while others enjoyed a vacation I couldn't afford. Tonight, I was the primary witness in a federal fraud investigation that would provide justice for dozens of families and recovery of hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen inheritance money. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for fighting back. Tyler stole our father's inheritance 2 years ago, and we thought we'd never see justice. You've given our family hope again." The Morrison family, no relation. I stared at that message for a long time before falling asleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges as the legal process continued, but confident that justice would ultimately prevail. The first week of January brought a cascade of legal developments that transformed Tyler and Jessica's lives from tropical vacation memories to federal criminal proceedings. I spent most of my time providing testimony to FBI investigators, meeting with prosecutors, and coordinating with other fraud victims who were finally seeing hope for justice and financial recovery. Tyler's situation deteriorated rapidly as federal investigators uncovered additional evidence of his criminal activities. Agent Williams called me on January 3rd with updates that exceeded even my expectations for comprehensive justice. "Mr. Thompson, we've discovered Tyler's fraud scheme extended far beyond inheritance theft. He was also manipulating airline reservations to steal luggage contents identity theft for credit card fraud and using passenger information for stalking and harassment." How much additional criminal activity? We're looking at over 200 separate incidents involving 47 different federal crimes. Tyler Morrison wasn't just stealing inheritances. He was running a comprehensive criminal enterprise using airline access as his foundation. The scope of Tyler's crimes shocked even experienced federal prosecutors. He had used his baggage handling position to steal valuable items from passenger luggage his investigation company resources to access personal information for identity theft, and his airline system access to manipulate reservations for harassment and fraud purposes. Tyler's employer at Pinnacle Investigations faced potential civil lawsuits from victims and regulatory investigations for inadequate employee supervision. The company's insurance carrier began settlement negotiations to avoid lengthy court battles with dozens of fraud victims. What about his airline job? United Airlines terminated him immediately and launched their own investigation into security breaches. They're facing potential federal penalties for allowing employee access to reservation systems without adequate oversight. Jessica's legal situation followed a different trajectory, but led to equally serious consequences. Her teaching position at Jefferson Elementary School was terminated when the school district learned about fraud charges involving her professional credentials. Parents demanded her immediate removal from any contact with children, citing concerns about moral character and trustworthiness. The ripple effects extended to our parents who faced financial devastation as they attempted to pay legal fees and managed the social stigma of having two adult children facing criminal charges simultaneously. Dad's small accounting business lost several major clients who questioned his professional integrity based on his family's legal troubles. Mom called me repeatedly begging for help with legal expenses and family support during the crisis. I listened to her voicemails without responding, still processing the betrayal and determining how to rebuild family relationships that had been shattered by Jessica and Tyler's criminal conspiracy. On January 8th, Tyler's defense attorney contacted federal prosecutors to discuss plea bargain arrangements. Facing overwhelming evidence and potential 20-year federal prison sentences, Tyler agreed to cooperate fully with investigations in exchange for reduced charges. Agent Williams shared the highlights of Tyler's confession with me during a meeting at FBI headquarters in downtown Denver. Tyler admitted to organizing and executing 47 separate inheritance fraud schemes, stealing over $900,000 from victim families, and using airline systems for various criminal activities spanning 3 years. Did he implicate Jessica directly? Extensively. Tyler provided detailed testimony about Jessica's role in planning inheritance thefts, creating false documentation, and recruiting additional family members to participate in fraud schemes. Tyler's cooperation revealed that Jessica had been far more involved in the criminal enterprise than she initially claimed. She had researched potential victims through social media and public records, helped create false documentation about family estrangements, and actively recruited other relatives to participate in inheritance theft schemes. Your sister wasn't just Tyler's girlfriend who got caught up in his criminal activities, Agent Williams explained. She was a full partner in developing and executing the fraud operations. Jessica's defense strategy collapsed when prosecutors presented Tyler's detailed testimony about her active leadership in the criminal conspiracy. Her attorney began negotiating plea arrangements to avoid trial and potential maximum sentencing. Meanwhile, civil lawsuits began emerging from fraud victims who sought financial recovery beyond what federal restitution could provide. Tyler's hidden assets were insufficient to fully compensate dozens of families for their stolen inheritances. So, victims pursued additional recovery through insurance claims and civil judgments. The media attention intensified as local news stations picked up the story and began interviewing fraud victims about their experiences. The Denver Post published a comprehensive investigation into airline security vulnerabilities that enabled Tyler's fraud scheme, prompting congressional hearings on passenger information protection. Sarah Chen from Pinnacle Investigations became a key prosecution witness and whistleblower who exposed how private investigation companies could be manipulated by criminal employees. Her testimony led to industry-wide reforms in employee supervision and client verification procedures. Mr. Thompson, your decision to investigate rather than accept defeat has created positive changes that will protect future families from similar fraud schemes, she told me during one of our regular case coordination meetings. On January 15th, exactly 3 weeks after my family had abandoned me at the airport, Tyler and Jessica both entered formal guilty pleas in federal court. Tyler accepted 18 federal charges with recommended sentencing of 12 to 15 years in federal prison. Jessica pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges with recommended sentencing of 3 to 4 years in state prison. Judge Patricia Martinez, who had originally presided over my grandmother's probate case, made a statement during Jessica's plea hearing that captured the emotional impact of their crimes. Ms. Thompson, you and Mr. Morrison didn't just steal money from inheritance beneficiaries. You stole final gifts from grandparents to grandchildren, destroyed family relationships built over decades, and exploited some of the most vulnerable moments in people's lives. Your crimes represent a profound betrayal of basic human decency. As January progressed toward Tyler and Jessica's sentencing hearings, I began receiving calls and messages from other fraud victims expressing gratitude for my investigation and persistence in pursuing justice. The Johnson family from Seattle invited me to their son's college graduation, which he could now afford thanks to recovered inheritance money. The Rodriguez family sent photos of their grandmother's house, which they had successfully reclaimed through civil proceedings. But the most meaningful contact came from my grandmother's neighbors in Portland, who had established a small scholarship fund in her memory using recovered assets from the inheritance fraud case. "Dorothy would be so proud of how you fought for justice," her neighbor Mrs. Patterson told me during a phone call. "She always said you were the strongest person in your family, even when you didn't realize it yourself." 1 year later, I stood in the conference room of Thompson Financial Security, consulting the business I had built, using my grandmother's inheritance and the insurance settlement from Tyler's fraud case. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see downtown Denver, stretching toward the mountains, a view that reminded me daily of how far I had traveled from that abandoned airport gate where my new life had truly begun. Sarah Chen, now my business partner and fiancée, was reviewing case files from our latest client consultation. We had helped 43 families over the past 12 months avoid inheritance fraud, identity theft, and financial manipulation schemes similar to what Tyler and Jessica had perpetrated. "The Williams family case looks straightforward," Sarah said, closing a thick folder. "Classic inheritance manipulation attempt using airline access and false documentation. We should be able to shut it down within a week." Our business model was simple, but effective. We provided comprehensive financial security consulting for families dealing with inheritance proceedings, probate disputes, and potential fraud schemes. Sarah's investigation expertise, combined with my financial analysis background, allowed us to identify and prevent fraud attempts before they could steal family assets. That makes 44 families we've helped this year. I said, updating our client database. 44 families who won't experience what I went through. The doorbell chimed as our afternoon appointment arrived. Janet Morrison, a widow from Colorado Springs whose husband's inheritance was being threatened by suspicious probate manipulation, looked exactly like I had felt 1 year ago, confused, betrayed, and desperate for someone to believe her story. "Mrs. Morrison, please sit down. Tell us what's been happening with your husband's estate." Her story was painfully familiar. Adult children claiming their father had become estranged from his wife, mysterious canceled travel arrangements preventing her from attending probate hearings, private investigators providing false documentation about family relationships. The same scheme Tyler had perfected now being executed by copycat criminals who had learned from news coverage of his methods. "Mrs. Morrison, you're dealing with attempted inheritance fraud using methods we know very well," Sarah explained gently. "The good news is that we can stop this scheme and protect your husband's final wishes." While Sarah gathered details about the fraud attempt, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that Christmas Eve at Denver International Airport. Tyler Morrison was serving 14 years in federal prison after his cooperation had helped prosecute 6 other inheritance fraud rings across multiple states. His testimony had led to recovery of over $2 million in stolen assets for fraud victims. Jessica had served 8 months in county jail before being released to supervised probation with requirements for community service and victim restitution payments. Her teaching career was permanently over, but she had found work as a financial literacy instructor for troubled youth, helping teenagers understand the consequences of fraud and financial crimes. Our parents had slowly begun rebuilding their lives after the social and financial devastation of their children's criminal charges. Dad's accounting business had recovered most of its lost clients through consistent, honest service and community involvement. Mom had started volunteering with crime victim support organizations, finding purpose in helping other families navigate legal proceedings and emotional recovery. The most significant transformation had been in our family relationships. Jessica and I met monthly for supervised conversations where she worked to understand the impact of her choices, and I practiced forgiveness without forgetting the lessons learned through betrayal. Trust was being rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than empty apologies. "I still can't believe I let Tyler convince me that stealing from you was justified," Jessica had said during our most recent meeting. "I was so jealous of your relationship with Grandma Dorothy and so desperate to please Tyler that I convinced myself you didn't deserve the inheritance. Jessica, the inheritance was never really about money. It was about Grandma Dorothy's final expression of love and trust. When you tried to steal it, you were stealing her last gift to me. I understand that now, and I understand why it took you so long to forgive me. Our parents had attended family therapy sessions for 6 months, learning to acknowledge their role in enabling Jessica's entitled behavior and their failure to support me during the crisis. Dad had written me a long letter, accepting responsibility for immediately believing Jessica's lies about my alleged family estrangement. Son, I should have called you directly when Jessica claimed you had abandoned the family. I should have investigated before accepting her story. I failed you when you needed support most, and I'm committed to earning back your trust through my actions. Mom's transformation had been more dramatic. She had always favored Jessica's outgoing personality over my quieter nature. But the criminal proceedings had forced her to confront how her favoritism had contributed to Jessica's sense of entitlement and willingness to harm family members for personal gain. Garrett, I spent your entire childhood making excuses for Jessica's behavior instead of teaching her accountability, Mom had said during one particularly difficult family therapy session. I created the monster that almost destroyed our family. Those conversations had been painful but necessary for rebuilding family relationships based on honesty rather than enabling dysfunction. Jessica was learning accountability through consequences and community service. Our parents were learning to treat their adult children fairly rather than playing favorites. I was learning to forgive without forgetting the importance of boundaries and self-protection. The business Sarah and I had built together represented more than just professional success. It was tangible proof that betrayal could be transformed into purpose, that personal pain could become protection for others facing similar threats. Mrs. Morrison, we're going to help you protect your husband's inheritance and expose the people who are trying to steal it, Sarah concluded after reviewing the widow's documentation. You deserve justice, and you're going to get it. As Mrs. Morrison left our office with renewed hope and a comprehensive plan for fighting the fraud attempt, I thought about all the families we had helped over the past year. Inheritance theft was more common than most people realized, but it was also preventable when families had access to proper information and professional support. That evening, Sarah and I attended the annual Crime Victims' Rights Dinner, where I had been asked to speak about transforming personal trauma into community service. The ballroom was filled with people who had survived various crimes and chosen to help other victims rather than remain trapped by their painful experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year ago, I was abandoned at an airport by family members who had conspired to steal my inheritance. Tonight, I'm engaged to an amazing woman who helped me find justice running a business that protects other families from similar fraud and rebuilding family relationships based on accountability rather than enabling. The audience included dozens of inheritance fraud victims who had been helped by our consulting business, along with FBI agents, prosecutors, and victim advocates who worked daily to provide justice for families facing financial crimes. The most important lesson I learned through this experience is that betrayal doesn't have to define us. We can choose to become bitter and isolated, or we can choose to transform our pain into purpose and our experience into protection for others. After my speech, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. Mr. Thompson, my grandfather's inheritance was stolen through airline ticket manipulation 2 years ago. We thought we had no options for justice until we heard about your case. Your investigation helped us recover $60,000 and send the criminals to prison. Stories like that reminded me why the painful journey from airport abandonment to business success had been worthwhile. Every family we helped, every fraud scheme we prevented, every criminal we helped prosecute represented validation that choosing justice over victimhood had been the right path. As Sarah and I drove home that night, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Garrett, I'm proud of how you've transformed the worst experience of your life into something that helps so many people. I couldn't have done it without you. Your investigation skills and moral courage made justice possible. And your refusal to accept defeat made everything else possible. Tyler and Jessica expected you to disappear quietly. Instead, you fought back and won. The next morning brought news that Tyler's appeal of his federal sentence had been denied, confirming that he would serve the full 14 years without possibility of early release. His victims had finally received complete justice along with financial recovery. Jessica sent me a text message that afternoon. Garrett, I saw the news about Tyler's appeal. I know you're probably happy that he's getting the full sentence. I just want you to know that I'm grateful you fought for justice instead of revenge. Your investigation helped me understand the difference between accountability and punishment. I stared at her message for a long time before responding. Jessica, justice was never about revenge. It was about protecting other families from experiencing what we went through. I'm proud that you're learning accountability and using your experience to help other young people avoid similar mistakes. As I write this story, it's been exactly 18 months since my family abandoned me at Denver International Airport. Thompson Financial Security Consulting has helped 87 families avoid inheritance fraud, identity theft, and financial manipulation. Sarah and I are planning our wedding for next fall with my parents, and Jessica all invited as family members who have earned their places through consistent changed behavior. The inheritance money that Tyler and Jessica tried to steal has been used to build a business that protects other families while providing Sarah and me with meaningful careers and financial security. My grandmother's final gift wasn't just money. It was the opportunity to discover my own strength and create positive change from personal trauma. But this story isn't really about inheritance money or criminal justice. It's about the choice we all face when confronted with betrayal by people we love and trust. We can choose to become victims, defined by our pain, or we can choose to become survivors who transform our experience into protection for others. Tyler Morrison thought he had found the perfect victim when he targeted my family's inheritance. A quiet, reliable person who would accept defeat rather than fight back. Someone who would disappear when abandoned rather than investigate when betrayed. He was wrong about who I really was, and his mistake became the foundation for justice, recovery, and transformation that extended far beyond my personal experience. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you choose to respond when people who were supposed to protect you decided to hurt you instead? The comments section is the perfect place to share your story and connect with others who understand the challenge of rebuilding trust after devastating betrayal. If this story resonated with your own experiences or helped you think differently about forgiveness and accountability, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about turning life's worst moments into opportunities for growth and positive change. Sharing this video helps other people find hope when they're facing their own family crises and legal challenges. Thank you for taking this journey with me from airport abandonment to business success, from family betrayal to rebuilt relationships based on honesty and accountability. Remember that your worst day doesn't define your future unless you allow it to. Justice is possible, healing is achievable, and transformation is always within reach when you refuse to accept defeat. Sometimes the greatest gift comes disguised as the greatest loss, and sometimes the people who try to destroy us actually provide the motivation we need to discover our own strength and create meaningful change in the world.